Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomena, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Hello, everyone. This is Patty Conklin and Healing Within. Thank you so much for joining me and my guest, Dr. Laurie Nadel. We've got an exciting show for you today, and I'm just so thankful that you're a part of it and listening in. Dr. Nadel and I are going to be speaking about overcoming fear, and it's a topic that I think a lot of people have issues with and have challenges with. So we're going to get to that in a minute, but I'd like to remind you about Dr. Nadel and how amazing she is. Dr. Laurie Nadel is a specialist in acute stress, trauma, and anxiety issues. Her award-winning book, The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes, with a foreword by Dan Rather, was voted one of the best books of 2018 by the prestigious Library Journal. She is also the author of the 4-time bestseller, Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power, which was featured twice on Oprah. She's been a guest on Dan Rather's America and Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. So, Laurie, thank you, as always, for joining me.
Thank you for having me as your guest. I'm really honored.
I love having you, and we're going to make it a monthly here. So I'm looking forward to that because your insight is always so impactful and so helpful, and overcoming fear is something that a lot of individuals truly struggle with. So I just think it's one of those important topics that we talk about here at Healing Within, because it's really all about healing inside, and healing. As we heal ourselves, we can help others heal just by being. We don't really even have to do anything. The more that we heal inside, the more that our energy goes outward and just makes everyone else around us a little bit more calm. So let's talk for a few minutes about overcoming fear. You know, one of the acronyms I use for fear is forgetting every available resource. And that's that heart center, the piece of the universe inside of all of us that we tend to forget about sometimes when we're going through fear, that we have so much capability all on our own. How do you view fear?
Well, I see fear as part of the anxiety spectrum. It's actually, I think, fear and anxiety are almost interchangeable. And interestingly, it's connected to intuition. Research shows that people who are intuitives in the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, which is the most widely used inventory in the world, millions of people have taken it. People who report out as intuitive have more fear, have more anxiety. And that's because Carl Jung said that intuition is the ability to see around the corner. And when we have fear, the mind goes around the corner and it creates a movie or a flash frame or a commercial of something which is so terrifying that the body believes it's already happened. And so the engine gets flooded with stress hormones and we get paralyzed or we become immobile or we become unable to access what you just expressed so beautifully, which is the resources of the heart.
Right, right. I know that, of course, I map out as an intuitive on the Myers-Briggs. No surprise there. Um, Fear is not something I experience that I would say I experience. However, anxiety, when I'm not at work, when I'm working, traveling, all of that, I never experience anxiety. But if I want to go into a restaurant by myself, um, anxiety hits massively. And I would not classify it as fear, although I agree with you, they're very interconnected. So what makes more, if we do separate them and say, fear is being able to look around the corner as an intuitive, anxiety is maybe feeling others before you go into a place like a restaurant. What's the difference? What am I experiencing?
Well, I think it's a question of degree. I think that, anxiety or social anxiety, and I have to agree, going into restaurants alone, for some reason is a little unsettling. I think especially as women alone, we tend to kind of wonder what people are going to see us eating alone and wonder, why is that person eating alone? That the mind kind of spins off certain scenarios that are uncomfortable. And I guess the difference is that, anxiety, if it's severe anxiety, then we go into total lockdown. And
Right.
when we have fear, there's also a kind of lockdown. We feel helpless. And
Hmm.
when we feel helpless, we tend to construct or project these kind of movies or these scenarios of horrible things that could happen. For example, somebody who has fear of riding in an elevator will be projecting that the elevator is going to stall or the elevator is going to crash or something horrible is going to happen because they have claustrophobia and they can't be in an enclosed space with other people. So I would say fear is really an intense kind of a lockdown on the same spectrum as anxiety, which normally it's uncomfortable unless it really ratchets up and becomes like a phobic kind of reaction.
Right. I know that, and all I can do is speak for myself because I experience that anxiety. When I'm looking at things I've never done before, um, there's an exhilaration, and so I never go into fear. It's always that shit effect. My sister used to say, you could be in the biggest barrel of it and you always come out smelling like a rose. And I'd say that's because the barrel was never horrible. It was, how do I figure out the next step to get myself out of that? And the exhilaration would start. Anxiety for me, I can sit in my car and cry for a half hour before I go into a restaurant and have to remind myself that it's simply anxiety and that I'll be okay. And like you said, whether it's that anxiety of, sitting alone, having people look at me, and yet I never experience it once I walk out the door and I've got my suitcase in hand or my briefcase in hand and I'm in work mode. Would never even occur to me. Go
Well, I
into a
think that
restaurant, whatever. It's that personal aspect.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Firstly, it's contextual, and and it's very personal because what causes fear in you might not cause fear in another person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that what you just said about being excited and kind of being pumped up or getting a charge out of working your way or navigating through a critical situation or a crisis.
Right.
I think is something that's very important. Some of us, and I'm like you, I'm wired up to go into. I get very calm, I get very centered, and I
Mm-hmm.
go into kind of survival mode. And I say, okay, like you, this is an adventure. You're Harrison Ford. You're hacking through the jungle, and you have to handle, this obstacle and that obstacle, and you just kind of work your way through it with your machete.
Right.
Without harming anybody, but doing what you need to do in as respectful way as possible. And sometimes after that, I can be overwhelmed, not so much with fear, but with a kind of flooding of stress hormones later, years later, that can produce a flashback that will have me re-experience the feeling of terror that I didn't experience in the moment. So
Interesting.
fear can be
Interesting.
it can be very tricky that way because years later, of course, you've already navigated through the situation. You came out, you were successful. But in order to get through the situation, we tend to we lock our fear or anxiety in a drawer. And we just say, I can't deal with this now. I can't deal with this now. I have to survive. I have to make decisions. I have to walk through the fire. And then years later, when you're feeling safe and calm, the drawer can just fly open. And suddenly you're experiencing a cascade of all of the chemicals of those emotions because all of our emotions are stored as molecules in the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that we call the emotional brain. It holds, it's where emotions originate, and it also holds all of our memories as emotional memories as molecules, or as William James said, kind of like beads on a necklace. And
Mm-hmm.
when we activate, a particular fear, then all of the times in our life when we have experienced that same fear, kind of imagine like a nuclear fission where each one of those beads gets reactivated and we get flooded with the chemistry of each of those particular events and experiences. And that can cause us to go into in a moment of intense fear, even though, it's not a reasonable fear because the threat has already been resolved.
Right, right. And so, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit in
Sure.
terms of where we store our emotions, because I think they go into the cells within the body and kind of store in different areas, not just the limbic. But what
That's
you're
true.
proposing is a really interesting dichotomy because you're looking at, if we get in a situation that's out of our norm, you and I just soldier through it and get it done and get calm and reach the other side. Where if I'm going into a restaurant and I cry for a half hour until I go into the restaurant, once I get in there, I'm okay. I want to talk about how those reverse in the future when we come back from our break and look at how those two completely reverse as time goes on. So let's talk about that when we come back. You're with Patty Conklin and Dr. Laurie Nadel at Healing Within. We'll see you in just a moment.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shaman worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Shamanic healing is the key to personal empowerment. Why? All 4 levels of our being, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, must be addressed for us to enjoy balanced, healthy, abundant lives. Yet there are few provisions for spiritual or energetic healing. Shamanism, found at the root of all cultures, is a very effective spiritual healing modality. To find quality shamanic healing you can trust, regardless of where you live, look no further than Find Your Path Home Long-Distance Shamanic Healing Program. All Path Home Long-Distance Healing practitioners have been trained and certified through Path Home Shamanic Art School. Change your life. Live abundantly. Schedule a long-distance shamanic healing session with Wilda Wieka or one of her quality practitioners today at findyourpathhome.com.
Hi, everyone. You're with Patty Conklin and Dr. Laurie Nadel on Healing Within. Thank you so much for listening in today. We're talking about overcoming fear and the connection between fear and anxiety and so many different emotions. But you know, Laurie, one of the things that we were talking about in the last segment about fear and anxiety. We're both the kind of people that when we get in a crisis situation, we kind of look at the overview very quickly. We calm down. We take care of what needs to be done, and we get through it. And on the other hand, for anxiety, for me, going into a restaurant, I'm going to use that because that's really about the only time I think I experience anxiety. I will get to a point where I can cry about the fact of going in and being seen and sitting by myself and so on and so forth. What's interesting to me is that let's go down the road 2 years, and you were talking about the fact that while we handle things in the moment, trauma, the fear that we didn't experience in the moment of a crisis, comes to the surface, and I'm assuming we would add that as post-traumatic stress. However, if I'm looking at anxiety and going into a restaurant, when I come out of the restaurant, my response may be to my body, see, that was just no big deal, and I never think of it again. So the anxiety in working through it before I go into it doesn't seem to have a residual for me. But when we're in a crisis situation, now I have to be honest to say, I've never experienced a post-traumatic after a crisis. And I think I've been in fairly many crises, but not like you, not like going through 9/11 or Parkland shooting or Hurricane Sandy. Talk to me a little bit about that, about how the fearful trauma comes up after the event while you're still calm and holding it together during the event.
Well, I think that's very interesting, and I can share with you that when I had 4 feet of the intracoastal in my living room, and my washing machine and my couch were bobbing around like like they were just little rubber duckies. And I was actually filled with awe at the power of nature and the power of the Holy Spirit and forces greater than we were. And I was completely calm and at peace. It was actually it was a spiritual experience for me. And I was able then, as I was going through the difficulties and obstacles of being lied to by the government and by unscrupulous vendors and contractors and the bank that confiscated the insurance settlement, all of these horrible things that, and I'm mentioning them because millions of us go through this every day, and nobody talks about it because natural disasters are on the increase, and the financial trauma that causes us sometimes to lose our home or to go bankrupt because of a natural disaster is an epidemic in this country that's silent and that is paralyzing for people who have to endure it. And there is really no one addressing this epidemic of fear that comes from losing control over your home and over your life. So as I was working my way through the aftermath, I did have fear that I was going to lose my home and everything that I had worked for, or that I might go bankrupt. But I got through it, I think, very effectively, and ultimately was able to rebuild my home and sell it to a young family. But then I'm thinking 7 years later now, I return to my community and I go back to the apartment that was in my family's, which is 10 feet, it's on the 10th floor. And it's not my home and it was not affected by the hurricane. But the day that I walked into that apartment after 7 years, it was foggy. The wind was howling at about 40 miles an hour around the apartment. And I was shown that there had been extensive water damage because of climate change and because of the ocean having leaked through the poor seals in the windows. And so there was a hole the size of my fist in the sheetrock in the windowsill. And I suddenly felt all of the terror that I never felt during the storm.
Wow.
And I froze, and my body went into this state of upheaval that took it took a few days for it to calm down. And I was frozen. I was just like frozen as whether it's cellular memory, and I do agree with you that a lot of our emotions get stored in our cells, or whether it was also the molecular chain reaction that suddenly got triggered, and I was just flooded with those acute stress hormones, and my body was shaking, even though I knew that this was completely unreasonable because there was no threat whatsoever. But my body felt it, and it was unexpected. Just like there are stories of Vietnam veterans or Iraq veterans, they're in the supermarket and a soup can falls to the floor, and suddenly they're crouched, behind they're crouched in an aisle, kind of hiding behind a pile of Kellogg's cereal boxes, and they're in position to shoot their rifle or their machine gun at an unseen enemy, because the body remembers, and a sudden loud noise can also activate fear molecules that are stored inside of us, even when the actual threat has gone. And so it's tricky that way. So when you're talking about the anxiety of going into a restaurant, part of that is remembered fear that you're remembering. When I went into a restaurant 5 years ago, I felt the same anxiety. When I went into a restaurant last month, I had the same anxiety, and you're able to kind of coach yourself through it. And that's very important, because the fear of something, the anticipation of having to do something that's challenging or overwhelming or scary is actually generates more fear than actually taking care of that particular event or action and having the behavior to make yourself go into the elevator or go into the restaurant. The fear of that change is actually worse in terms of the physiology, the chemistry, than doing the thing that you're afraid of.
Right, right. And one of the things that I've done throughout the years is made it my mission, my quote mission, to at least go into 3 restaurants a year by myself. And and that's come up from one from years ago. But like I said, if I'm in work mode, if I'm on the road, and Delta and I have dated close to 3 million miles now between Delta, I guess, and assorted airlines. I never experience it. I'm in focus, I'm in work mode and so forth, and there's no residual trauma after having gone to a restaurant or being at work or whatever. So I find it interesting that our bodies can, and like you said, those reactors can kick up depending on what's going on. If I'm in work mode, then I know what's going on. I'm paying attention. I've got situational awareness, so on and so on and so on and so on. And yet it was a challenge and has been a challenge in that one little piece. And I wonder how many people kind of look at, especially if they're not feeling well. And let's say they've had a cold, or part of their body has been hurting and so forth. And they go into the fear of what if. I've always said that if a woman calls me and says, I found a lump in my breast and I'm afraid it's cancer, my response typically is going to be, well, do you want to have cancer? Because I know the power of my words, and I know the power of people respecting my thoughts. And if I said, gee, it looks kind of, sketchy in that area, I'm a little concerned. If she didn't have cancer when she called, chances are if I respond that way, she's going to have cancer by the time she hangs up. So that fear of what if, especially when it comes to the physiology of our body, becomes very, very powerful. And, I encourage people to take a deep breath and say, okay, what is now responsibility is to move forward and make sure that, you're getting checked out and you're being healthy and talking nicely to your body and thanking it for being healthy and so forth. But how we've only got a little bit left in this segment, we'll carry over, but how do we help people not go into that abreaction of, oh my gosh, it's got to be the worst thing possible?
That's a good question. We can talk about that when we come back from the break.
Yeah, I think it's an important one because people truly go into the worst case scenario. And you can't blame it on your doctors. You can't blame it on anything other than the fact that you're having a reaction. Doctors have to tell you everything they might think is going on, because the reality is they're in that catch-22 that if they don't, and you end up having the one thing that they didn't mention, then they're going to get sued and go into malpractice. So I think it's just this horrible circle that we've gotten ourselves into from a medical standpoint and from a personal standpoint of our fear as we grow older, as we age, as we go into the baby boom generation as we get older. It's really something to pay attention to. So we're going to continue this when we come back from our break. This is Patty Conklin and Dr. Laurie Nadel, wonderful psychotherapist, and we'll be back on Healing Within in just a minute.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Hi, everyone. It's Patty Conklin back with Dr. Laurie Nadel and Healing Within. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking about overcoming fear, and we've been kind of connecting fear and anxiety. And now I want to kind of connect that fear and health, our medical situation, not just our psychological or emotional, but medical situation. And are we just pre-programmed throughout the centuries to think the worst, Laurie, when something happens?
I think that in this day and age, we're saturated with and bombarded with so many different visual images and too much information on Dr. Google, which is not necessarily accurate information. So people are kind of obsessed with, if they have a hangnail, they're going to look it up on Google, and then they're going to decide that, it must be some kind of abscess that's going to turn me septic, and they end up in the emergency room. So I think that there's a general hysteria around health, especially among baby boomers. Anxiety or fear, one way to think about it is the disease of the what ifs. And, some people can be paralyzed about the prospect of walking out of their house because, what if they get hit by a truck or a tree falls on them? And so they'll stay in their house and not move. That's how strong it can be. I also think that we have a generational fear of aging and an almost maniacal denial of what happens as we age, and that the body is designed to age.
Yes.
I'm going to be 72, and there are certain natural conditions that are happening. And when I discuss them with people, and they kind of look at me, and they'll say, "Oh, but have you tried this? Have you tried this?" Well, I try everything that I think is reasonable. But what I'll say to them is, my body is like an engine that had a 50,000-mile warranty. And the warranty expired 22,000 miles ago.
Right.
And the parts are wearing out, which is what they're designed to do. And I do my best to make the best of it and repair what can be repaired, and to heal what can be healed, and to move on. But there's an organic process here that, and some people will say, well, if you think that way, that's what's going to happen. I said, well, there are people who don't believe in gravity, but gravity exists whether you believe it or not.
Right.
And so I think that, with fear, it escalates this denial of the realities of aging. And the Buddha said that we choose to incarnate into a human form so that we can experience the suffering of being human, because that's what accelerates our spiritual growth.
Absolutely.
And that part of what we sign up for, most of us, is to experience what the Buddha calls the suffering of old age, suffering, and ultimately death. Nobody wants to experience that on a conscious level, but on a soul level, this is what we contracted for when the soul entered human form. And as somebody who tries to live according to the Dharma, I find that very comforting, because then I don't fight against things because I don't like what's happening to my muscle tone, or I don't like what's happening to my face, or I don't like what's happening to my lower spine, or any of those areas that are kind of wearing out. That's
Right.
what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And we have to adjust our life gracefully around, I can push myself to exercise, but I could no longer windsurf, and I could train every day for the rest of my life and lift weights, but I'm still never going to be able to do that again.
Right. And
I've
be
had
at peace that you did, right?
exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
In
I
fact,
think,
I went to a doctor a few months ago, and we were talking about certain things that are going on, and I looked at him and I said, "So no more trekking in the Amazon for me." And he just looked at me, his eyes like bugged out. I said, "It's just a joke."
yeah,
I said,
yeah,
I'm just joking. I know I can't trek in the Amazon anymore,
right.
but I'm really glad I did it. I'm glad I did it in my 40s and 50s, and it's done, and
It's
I had a
done.
great time and wonderful adventures. But I'm not going to put my life at risk because I'm no longer in condition to be able to do that. That's
Right.
just accepting things, things that are realistic. And with fear, I think we jump into, the reservoir of unreal possibilities, and we escalate them. And
Right.
as we make them, if they're visual, we make them larger, we make them brighter, we make them more colorful and more intense. And the body believes that we're in that movie, that disaster movie, and
Right.
that our body is experiencing the worst outcome possible.
Right. I think that you stated that really eloquently and beautifully, that, our bodies, remember 20 years ago when the phase was, well, I'm going to live to 100, I'm going to live to 120.
Right.
And, everybody was on that plank of, I'm going to live until 100, 120. And, we do see some, incredible people at 105, whatever, still running, marathons and, doing their half mile or their 3/4 mile or whatever. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful when your body's doing what you enjoy and you're appreciating it. But like you, I would not hike in the Amazon again. I did it in my early 40s, and that was fantastic and awesome, but I wouldn't go at 62, just because I remember how demanding it was of my body. And years ago, when I farmed, I could pick up a 50-pound hay bale and throw it up into a second mile window, and I could do 1,000 in a day. I'm not quite sure I'd pick up one, much less throw it into a second mile window. But I think that part of life is overcoming fear and being able to experience all of these different things. So as we age, we're able to say, yep, did that. And I think people do a disservice to themselves, honestly, when they're waiting to retire to be able to experience all of this, instead of experiencing it as they're younger, so that they can get the most out of their bodies. Because as you said, our bodies are designed to, at some point, move on. And the one thing that I think about is back, and I think it was the Hindus that would do this, and correct me because you probably much more versed in this, but they knew when the soul was ready to leave the body, and they would sit up next to a tree and they would simply leave. They didn't have to go through the process of suffering and disease. And sometimes I will say and teach that, medical science is awesome, but it also is problematic because we've become so good at keeping people alive beyond what they should or could or whatever, however you want to phrase it, that their quality of life is no longer sustainable. We're just keeping ourselves alive.
Right.
And
I people in hospitals who are just a heartbeat and a brainwave, and they're never going to sit up or talk or laugh
Right.
or eat or dance or have a conversation. But biologically, as a bioorganism, they're still living. And I don't understand, what's the point of that? Why does medicine do that?
Right. I had a dear friend who passed away Wednesday, daughter-in-law of a friend, and only 30 years old, and suffered blood clots and was brain dead. And, and sitting down at the hospital and just kind of reviewing life, and how precious it is to live every single day and to appreciate every single day, and thinking about her 2-year-old daughter who is just gonna just have pictures and so forth of her mama, that every day is a gift that we're given. And especially for us that are in the baby boomer age range now, it's even more so. And, I don't think that I'm being depressing or having down thoughts when I say, I didn't feel this way at 50, but at 60 and 62, certainly, I realized that I'm kind of on the other side of the pendulum swing now.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it makes even that much more every day more precious, because it is. And then you see situations of, in the last month, a 30-year-old and 35-year-old who I was very close to, both passed away. And just realizing that if you have fear of living, then you will miss out on all of the incredible, wonderful things you can do every day, which is go outside and breathe and watch the sun and watch the sunrise and watch the sunset, and be able to be with family and friends and make your mark for humanity. And that doesn't mean that you're going to do amazing, incredible things and be world renowned. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is for you personally to go out and make your mark upon somebody that you're just smiling at the grocery store, that you're talking to the cashier, that you're talking to, the people picking up your trash, and you're just talking to your neighbors, and you're making your mark by being genuine and loving to everyone you come into contact with, because that's an important piece. So when we come back, I want to talk about when fear goes into anger, kind of moving beyond the medical. When fear goes and anger end up being quite a toxic cocktail, as you call it, because it truly is. If people don't know how to express their fear, a lot of times they'll go into anger. So you're with Patty Conklin and Dr. Laurie Nadel, and we'll be back with you in just a moment on Healing Within.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, The 70-Year Cover-Up Exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
Did you expect your business to flourish, but instead it plateaued or didn't get off the ground yet? Would you like to achieve massive goals and discover new sources of income within your business? When you're ready to experience that type of success with fast results, Cindy Hendricks is the business coach for you. Her work with entrepreneurs and business owners has been life-changing. To get you and your business where you want to be, go to imaginemoresuccess.com.
Has the fear of public speaking stalled your business or personal life? What would you give to develop and maintain supreme confidence? Have an invaluable private program to always perform at your best. Imagine how you would feel. You can have all that and so much more today with Thomas Hides' life-changing course called Number One Fear Unleashed. Visit numberonefear.com and be liberated from your fear of public speaking.
Everyone, you're with Patty Conklin and Dr. Laurie Nadel. We're talking about overcoming fear, and we've talked about kind of the emotional aspects and, you know, our medical conditions and physical. And I think we're both in agreement that, you know, the body is designed at some point to let go. So our soul goes on to our next journey. You know, it's I want people to remember that your time is not necessarily the universe's time. And just because you want something doesn't mean that that's what your soul's contract is. And your soul may be leaving early. It may end up being able to stay for a long time in this physical form, but let go of things you can't control. And how long you live specifically is not within your control. Your job is to be healthy and do the best that you can do according to your beliefs on a day-to-day basis. But let's talk about, Laurie, when our fear takes the adjunct of anger, and all of a sudden anger is manifesting, and you know it's fear when you see the anger in others. But how does that come about? Just incapable of experiencing the fear, and so hormones, testosterone, stressors, whatever, then create anger. Talk to me about that.
Well, I would say that anger comes from a sense of helplessness. And as we talked about before, fear, comes from a sense of helplessness. And very often we can never control what another person thinks or what another person does. I mean, we can try to influence people, but sometimes the feeling of helplessness can become overwhelming. And it will, there are two sides of this, because anger can be a positive force for social change. If we look at the nonviolent movement and Gandhi, if we look at the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the Me Too movement, the gay rights movement, they're all a healthy channeling of anger as a positive force for social change. And so, anger, like electricity, it kind of has a duality. It's neither good nor bad. It's what we do with it that matters. But when you combine fear and anger, which I think is what we're seeing in this country right now, in our society, there's a fear on the right and on the left that things are not going in the direction that we want them to go in. And as a collective, that fear of feeling helpless is being channeled or transformed into anger. And some of that anger is healthy. As I said, anger about climate change, for example, has caused a global movement to try to address some of the issues that hopefully we can manage, even though, the forces of nature are greater than humans can control. So I think that sense of anger and helplessness and fear is a reaction to not being able to control forces that are greater than we are. And I think that when we look at, for example, the violence, the sectarian violence, the religious hatred, the racial hatred that's coming up in this country, it's really coming from fear. Anger comes from hurting and wanting, and we're usually wanting something to be different, or we're wanting someone to see us differently, or to value us, or to listen to us, or to pay attention, or to respect us. And when we don't get that, we can either, we can go into a fear reaction, or we can go into an angry reaction, and that can be projected in ways that are really not healthy. But as a society, when I look and I see, I read a lot of different news outlets every day, and the level of anger that is kind of seeping into the media, not just because of what they're reporting, but because of how it's being reported. There's so much opinion being mixed with fact now that the toxic cocktail of fear and anger is kind of leaking through all of the channels through which we get our information.
Right.
And the danger is that it is like a bacterial infection, and that this toxic, mixture of fear and anger is kind of leaking into all areas of our culture. And it's now, I think, becoming a mass epidemic that's not healthy for us as a people.
As a former journalist, I'm sure that you're much more aware than a lot of us in terms of the opinion pieces that take primetime news, it seems like these days. And like you, I read from many different outlets because I want to see what everybody's saying, not just one or two channels. But a lot of people don't do that. Where does personal responsibility come into working through your own fear and or anger when it comes to things you can't control? I think so much comes back to personal responsibility, and if you're disingenuous as a opinion host or whatever you want to call it, if you're speaking your truth, that's one thing. But if you're being disingenuous just to spin a line, no matter whether it's right or left, I'm not taking sides here. Where does personal responsibility come into our morality and ethics, and how does that, what is our responsibility personally? I don't know if we can answer that.
I was going to say, do you want a 30-second answer? Because I'm like, that, I've encapsulated the meaning of life, and I can just retire from being human. And
There you
move
go.
on.
There you go. Move on. Yep.
Move on.
That is the 30-second. Yes, I hear you.
The 30-second response. I think it all comes down to personal responsibility, but whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, I think that coming to terms with the difference between what is within our responsibility and where do we have to kind of give up wanting to control forces that are greater than ourselves. It's finding that balance within ourselves, so that we know, what they call in Buddhism, they call right concentration, right action. In which situations, can our conscience guide us to take right action, which is nonviolent and harmless to others, and in which situations do we need to kind of address our own fear and our own anger and our own reactions, because that's really all we can do. We can't affect change in the outer environment necessarily. So I think, there are situations where we really just, if you're walking through a bad part of town at night, you have to be watchful and you have to be vigilant and you have to be careful. But that doesn't mean that you have to walk around with an AR-15 because you think you might have to blow away half of a block. So, so it's really taking responsibility in a realistic way for, where are my fears reasonable? Where are my fears unreasonable and irrational? And, just like going into a restaurant or having to, get your car in a parking lot, when the lights have gone out in the store and you're walking around in the dark, what can you do to manage your emotions so that you can navigate safely to your destination? That's balancing your emotions and the actual actions that you need to take in the outer world. That is the combination that we're constantly trying to find. Especially,
do you think the saturation though of just so much media of so, I mean, we're on this show, we're giving our opinions, right? I mean, we're doing what we think is right in terms of giving our thoughts and our points and so forth. But we've gotten so saturated. I question sometimes, and maybe it's not a legit question. I question whether or not people in general take the time to go within to really decide what it is that they think. Or are they just being reactionary for the most part?
Well, I think that people are so distracted now, and I think it's becoming kind of a global phenomenon, that the average attention span now is at least in this country 8 seconds, and Microsoft did a survey of millions of people, and they found that if something takes more than 2 seconds to download, that people become impatient. And in my book, The 5 Gifts are humility, and humility is what helps us, gives us the grace to accept what we can't control, what we can't understand. The second gift is patience. And I call that the unbearable gift, because none of us really want it, and we don't go within enough. And I include myself in that. We're so saturated, as you said, and bombarded with moving images and visuals. From the second you turn on your devices in the morning, you're getting flash frames of things to buy and things to look at, and horrible massacres that are going on, in other parts of the country or other parts of the world.
Right.
And it's too much for the conscious mind to understand. And so you have two choices. One is to kind of go within and to settle yourself and to allow the unconscious mind to kind of become very calm and very still, so that you can kind of separate. You can go into your source, go into your heart, and you can separate from all these distractions.
It's so important. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna have to leave it at that on patience. But I really love you and the folks listening to, for all of us, to just sit with yourself and really feel what you're feeling and what you know. And thank you so much for just taking the time to think. And this is Patty Conklin and Dr. Laurie Nadel, and we'll catch you next time on Healing Within. Thank you so much for joining.